Everyone mocked the mountain man for taking an ugly wife, until they saw her on the wedding night. The first snow came early that year. It coated the jagged trails and tall pine trees of Elk Ridge like a hush fell over the world. The wind moved slow, pushing cold breath across the valley. There were no sounds of laughter, no carts rolling in, just silence, broken only by the crunch of boots against frozen dirt. Isaiah Boone, the mountain man, walked alone. He was a tall, broad-shouldered figure wrapped in worn leather and furs. His beard was thick, touched with early gray, eyes sharp but distant. He had lived on that mountain longer than anyone could remember, traded pelts for coffee, fixed his own roof when storms tore it down. Some said he spoke to bears. Others said he didn't speak at all. But everyone agreed on one thing. Isaiah Boone was not a man meant for people. So when he rode into Hilford village one morning and dismounted with a woman draped in a torn cloak, people stared, whispered, laughed. The woman didn't lift her head. Her face was hidden beneath shadows, her figure bent, fragile. The seam of her cheek was rough like old scars, and when the cloak slipped slightly, a discolored eye glimmered beneath. Children were pulled away. Vendors paused mid-sale. One man muttered a slur, loud enough for Isaiah to hear. Isaiah didn't flinch. He looked at no one. He simply wrapped his arm around her and kept walking, toward the chapel, toward the preacher, toward the vows. "God help him," someone whispered. "She looks cursed." But Isaiah wasn't looking for beauty, not the kind that fades with time. He was looking for something else. The wedding was quiet. Only the preacher, Isaiah, and the woman. Her name, barely spoken, was Elsie. Her voice was hoarse, like it had not been used in years. She didn't smile. She barely breathed. Isaiah said his vows in 6 slow chords. "I will not turn from you." Then he gently placed a ring made of braided pine onto her finger. Not gold, not silver, just wood, honest, and from the mountain. That night, they returned to his cabin. Wind howled through the gaps in the timber, but inside, the fire was warm. She stood by it, her hands trembling as she reached to undo her cloak. Isaiah didn't look right away. He sat quietly, waiting, as if giving her the choice to stay hidden. But when she finally turned, and the firelight touched her full face, Isaiah stood. Not because she was beautiful in the way others understood, but because she had survived something so terrible, and still stood before him. He didn't move to touch her. He just whispered, "You're safe now." The cabin smelled of cedar, smoke, and silence. Elsie sat near the fire but kept her body turned to the wall. Her hands trembled as she held a tin cup of water, though she hadn't drunk from it in an hour. Her lips were cracked. Her skin, pale and cold, seemed to flinch even when nothing touched it. She hadn't said more than a few words since the wedding. Isaiah moved quietly, his footsteps heavy but slow, deliberate. He did not ask her questions. He did not demand answers. He only placed a folded quilt beside her and set an extra log on the fire, watching as the flames danced against the dark. Outside, the wind beat against the walls. Inside, the weight of unspoken pain thickened the air. That night, Isaiah lay awake on the floor, giving her the only bed. His eyes stared up at the timber beams he had carved decades ago, remembering a voice. Soft, broken from long ago. "You'll leave like the others. You're just kinder about it." That had been Anna's voice, his younger sister, the one who didn't survive the winter. He remembered the bruises she hid under her sleeves, the way she jumped when doors slammed, how she used to brush her hair in the dark so no one saw the patches missing. Isaiah had been a boy then, too young to stop the man who did it, their stepfather, too young to stop the shame, but not too young to remember. Elsie's silence reminded him of Anna. The same stillness, the same way of folding into herself like she was trying to disappear. Isaiah turned his face to the firelight. He felt a deep ache behind his ribs, not pity, not romance, something older, something sacred, a quiet oath forming in the stillness of the room. But doubt crept in too. He was no hero, no healer, just a man with calloused hands and a quiet house. What could he offer a broken woman who flinched at warmth? He thought about taking her back to the village come morning, leaving her with the nuns at the old stone church. They were kind. They'd know what to do. And yet, he didn't move. Midnight passed. The wind stilled. He heard the faintest sound, fabric shifting. And when he opened his eyes, Elsie stood at the hearth, quilt wrapped around her shoulders like armor. Her back was to him. "I can leave," she said softly, without turning. "If it's too much." Isaiah sat up slowly, not rushing. "I built this place for winters," he said, "and you've brought the hardest one with you. But I didn't ask the mountain to be easy either." She turned halfway, her one good eye catching the glow of the fire. "I don't know how to be someone's wife." "You don't have to be," he said. "You just have to be here, alive." There was a pause. Then she nodded once and lay back down, still facing the wall, but a little less tense. Isaiah leaned back against the wood. He knew now. He would not take her back. Even if she never smiled, even if she never healed. He would not walk away again. Not this time. 3 days passed before the knock came. It was not loud, not hurried, but sharp, measured, like a man who didn't need to raise his voice to be obeyed. Isaiah opened the door with his hand resting near the hatchet he kept by the frame. Outside stood a tall man in a black coat, face windburned and smiling, but the smile didn't watch his eyes. 2 others stood behind him, rifles slung low, boots too clean for real mountain men. "Name's Orville Klein," the man said. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Isaiah didn't speak. Elsie had frozen behind him. He didn't need to turn to know. He could feel the shift in her breath. Orville smiled wider. "She took something. Then she ran. Don't worry. I ain't here to raise dust. Just want what's owed." Isaiah's grip tightened. "There's nothing here for you." Orville tilted his head, his voice dropping low. "She told you about her face, didn't she? How she got those marks. She say it was a fire, maybe some accident?" He laughed. "She did that to herself. Said it'd make her worthless so I'd let her go. But she took my ledger. Names. Deals. That little face of hers cost me more than coin. Cost me trust." Elsie whimpered, a sound like a torn animal. "I don't want her," Orville continued. "Not anymore. But I need the book, and I need the girl to stop breathing so folks stop asking questions." Isaiah didn't answer. He simply shut the door in the man's face. The silence that followed was thick with firelight and breath. He turned. Elsie had backed into the corner, both hands shaking, her mouth forming words she couldn't say. "I didn't want to bring danger," she gasped. "I just wanted to forget. I thought if I looked ugly enough, if I acted broken enough, they'd leave me alone." Isaiah walked over and knelt in front of her. "You're not the reason danger came," he said. "You're the reason I remembered what it means to stand." She looked up at him then, really looked, and for the first time he saw anger flash in her eyes, not fear, not shame. "He owns sheriffs," she whispered. "He sells girls like cattle. He burned the last woman who spoke out. They said it was an accident." Isaiah nodded once. He stood, walked to the hearth, and opened the old true. Enke buried beneath firewood. Inside lay a long rifle wrapped in oilskin. He hadn't touched it in years. He handed her a small pistol, light enough for her hands. "Tomorrow we ride," he said. She blinked. "Where?" "Somewhere. They don't expect us." The next morning the cabin was empty. Tracks led north, away from the ridge, but Isaiah knew they'd be followed. Orville didn't bluff. And if what Elsie said was true, this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about silencing truth. and Isaiah Boone had buried too many truths already. They camped by a frozen stream, deep in the pines where the sun barely touched the forest floor. Isaiah built a fire while Elsie gathered twigs, her hands raw and red. She didn't speak much, but she no longer flinched when their hands brushed. She watched him, not with fear now, but with cautious learning. He carved strips of meat from a deer they had hunted the day before. It was Elsie who had taken the shot. Isaiah had shown her how to breathe first, how to steady, how to let the silence carry the bullet. When the deer fell, she didn't cheer. She just whispered, "Thank you," not to him, but to the animal. And he knew then she had killed before. That night, she cooked over the fire, adding herbs he didn't recognize. A scent filled the air, something delicate, almost floral. He hadn't tasted anything like it in years. He didn't ask how she knew it. He just nodded once. She smiled, barely. The next day, they crossed an old bridge made of stone and rot. Midway through, Elsie paused and turned to him. "Do you believe scars make people ugly?" she asked quietly. Isaiah looked at her, long and steady. Then, without a word, he rolled up his sleeve. A thick, jagged line ran from his elbow to his shoulder, another one just above his ribs. And then the one on his chest. A curved scar, old and deep. He didn't explain. But she understood. She stepped closer, pulled her shawl aside, and showed him the burn across her neck, shaped like a hand. Then the faded blue mark on her wrist where rope had cut deep. Still, they said nothing. Later, that evening, she watched him as he whittled wood near the fire. His fingers were slow, careful, smoothing the edge of a pine handle. When he handed it to her, she realized it was a hairbrush. Simple, rough, but clean and carved with care. She looked at him, her throat tightening. "No one's ever made me something." He didn't answer. He just nodded toward her lap, as if to say, "Try it." She did. And when the brush pulled gently through her tangled hair, her eyes filled, but the tears didn't fall. She set it down, then reached out, fingers trembling, and touched his shoulder, not for comfort, not out of fear, but to say, "I see you too." They slept that night beside each other, backs touching, the fire low. No kisses, no vows, just breath shared in the cold air, in the quiet before the storm. And when Isaiah woke before dawn, he saw her already dressed, pistol at her side, eyes on the trail below. She didn't look like a victim anymore. She looked like someone who remembered what it meant to be worth defending. And he realized, maybe he did too. They reached the old ranger outpost by noon. It had long been abandoned, a skeletal frame of timber and rusting hinges, nestled in a hollow carved by wind and time. Isaiah chose it because it had one way in and no easy way out. If they were coming, it would be here. Elsie laid the rifle rounds on the table, counted each one twice. Isaiah boarded the back windows, reinforced the front door with a beam stripped from the rafters. Neither of them spoke much. They didn't have to. The silence between them now felt like trust. By dusk, they came. 3 horses, 4 men, Orville leading, his coat darker than the trees behind him. He didn't shout. He just dismounted, dusted off his gloves, and walked to the edge of the clearing. "Isaiah Boone," he called, "let's not make this messier than it needs to be." Isaiah stepped out with his rifle in hand, calm, grounded. "She stays with me," he said. "She's a thief," Orville replied, voice flat. "A liar, and worse, she's a witness." Isaiah didn't blink. "She's also my wife." Orville smirked. "That doesn't mean anything out here." Elsie stepped out behind Isaiah then, slowly, deliberately, rifle raised. "She took that ledger because she wanted people to know," Isaiah said, "about the girls, the fire, the bribes, the missing deputy. And if you kill us now, everyone in Hilford will know what you came to silence." Orville's eyes narrowed. "You think you're the first man to try and protect her?" Isaiah raised his rifle slightly. "No, but I'll be the last." The standoff stretched long and thin. Wind howled between the trees. One of Orville's men shifted, uneasy. And then a voice came from the tree line. "Drop your weapons." From the left flank, 5 armed men emerged in brown coats with star-shaped badges. Hilford's marshals. Behind them, the preacher from the wedding, and beside him, 2 girls, young, bruised, but alive. Elsie gasped. Isaiah stepped forward, stunned. "We found the ledger in the church offering box," the preacher said. "She left it there, right under our noses." One of the marshals stepped up. "We thought it was gossip, until names matched missing reports." Orville turned, hand reaching for his holster. Isaiah didn't wait. He stepped in front of Elsie as the gun rose, and the shot rang out. But it wasn't Isaiah who fell. It was Orville. Elsie stood, pistol smoking in her hands, face pale but steady. One of the girls who had escaped Orville's ranch ran to her. "You saved us," she whispered. Isaiah dropped to his knees, more from shock than pain. "You were supposed to run," he said, looking at Elsie. She shook her head. "No more running." The marshals arrested the remaining men. Orville's empire crumbled before the trees stopped swaying. The preacher crossed himself. "I reckon God doesn't need beauty to recognize courage." Isaiah looked at Elsie. Her face still bore scars. Her eyes still turned slightly. But she stood tall, and in that moment, she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. The snow fell heavier that night. It blanketed the blood, covered the hoofprints, silenced the clearing until it felt like the land itself was grieving. Orville's body was wrapped in canvas and dragged away by the marshals without ceremony. No prayers, no farewells, just a name scratched into a report and tossed into a saddlebag. The other men were shackled, loaded onto horses, their heads down. No one looked back. Elsie sat beside the fire, inside the ruined outpost, her hands still trembling, though the gun was gone. The pistol lay on the ground between her and Isaiah. Neither had picked it up since the shot. Isaiah's arm bled from a deep graze near the shoulder. Elsie cleaned it in silence. Her touch was gentle but sure. He didn't flinch, didn't speak, just watched her face. Not the scars, but the quiet determination behind her eyes. Outside, the preacher offered to take them back to Hilford. Isaiah shook his head. "There's nothing for us there," he said. The preacher nodded once, as if he understood. "Then go where the world is quiet," he whispered. "Somewhere that won't ask you to explain yourselves." By morning, the fire had gone cold. Isaiah and Elsie packed what little they had, rifles, rations, the brush he had carved. No words were exchanged, only glances. Only a shared breath as they stood at the edge of the clearing and looked one last time at the path behind them. They didn't bury anything. Not Orville, not the memories, not the past. Some wounds aren't buried, they're carried. They rode north, not fast, not fleeing, but steady, like people who had nothing left to fear. The snow fell around them like a curtain, thick and soft. The world shrank into silence, only the sound of hooves and breath. At one point, Isaiah looked over. Elsie's scarf had fallen back, her face open to the wind. The scars were there, as always, but she didn't hide them, not anymore. They passed a stream. He paused to drink, but she stayed back, staring into the glassy water. "I used to think I had to die,"